Maybe that's why Donald Trump was being very nice to Mark Carney. Maybe. And maybe now we know why there is not going to be a federal budget disclosed this year. We all know that the Liberal Party grabbed onto Donald Trump and branded him the existential threat to Canada in order to scare Canadians into voting for Mark Carney during the 2025 federal election. What we didn't know, at least until now, is that Mark Carney turned the entire tariff rhetoric into a massive lie, and that as of mid-April, there effectively was no standing up to Donald Trump, and there were no tariffs. Let's take a look. Canada's new tariffs on US dropped to nearly zero with exemptions, Oxford says. This was published by Bloomberg News on May 14th. Canada has effectively suspended almost all of its retaliatory tariffs on US products, tamping down inflation risks and improving its growth outlook, according to Oxford Economics. The government imposed new import taxes of 25% on about $60 billion, or $43 billion US, of US-made goods in March in response to the first round of tariffs from the Trump administration. Canada also retaliated against US auto tariffs in early April by putting its own levies on US vehicles. But Prime Minister Mark Carney and his government then announced a 6-month tariff exemption for products used in Canadian manufacturing, processing, and food and beverage packaging, and for items related to healthcare, public safety, and national security. Automakers got a break too. Companies that manufacture in Canada, such as General Motors, are allowed to import some vehicles into Canada tariff-free. Those exemptions mean Canada's tariff rate increase on the US is quote-unquote nearly zero, according to calculations by Oxford. Quote, "It's a very strategic approach from a new Prime Minister to really say, we're not going to have a retaliation," Tony Stillo, Oxford's Director of Canada Economics, said in an interview. Quote, "It's a strategic play on the government's part to not damage the Canadian economy." What is he talking about? That's the question, right? That's the question. Because all we heard is that we're hitting back and we're fighting back and all of this. Well, here's the thing. What this effectively does is it makes the Liberal campaign out to be a complete con. A complete con. We already knew that they were latching on to Donald Trump and the Americans as essentially a Hail Mary to try and frighten Canadians into submission in order to voting for them, and it just barely worked. But Canadians, the ones that were fooled by Mark Carney, you need to understand how big of a deal this is. He flat out lied to you during the entire campaign. And if you don't believe me, which I wouldn't expect you to because we do lean conservative on this channel, if you don't believe me, let's look at Mark Carney's words himself while he was campaigning.
We are fighting unjustified U.S. tariffs, including those on steel and autos with counter tariffs of our own. And those are designed to cause maximum pain in the United States, but have only a minimal impact here in Canada. America, more specifically, Donald Trump wants to break us so America can own us. They want our land. They want this land. They want our resources. They want our water. They want our country. Never! Because Canada is not America. It is not for sale. It's not America. It never was. Never will be. And the fact is that America is a threat to our country. And we have to treat them that way. Okay? Okay, Mike, if I understand your question, you're trying to narrow the affordability issue to the tariff element of it, or do you want to talk on consumers specifically? Well, that's okay. So that has been fundamental to the way that we have focused our counter tariffs, which is to minimize the impact on consumers. So the goods that we're targeting have Canadian alternatives or other alternatives. And in many cases, particularly with respect to consumer goods, Canadians are voting with their wallets, voting with their choices. They're making choices to support Canada. We will fight back against Trump's tariffs. We will protect our workers and businesses, and above all, we will build, baby, build. Said it's a joke. Others ignored it for months. Right from the start, I took it seriously. And because of that, that drives our actions. That drives the strength of our response to their tariffs. That's why we're one of the countries that are retaliating. That drives the strength and the ambition of the economic strategy to build Canada strong. And it will drive our negotiation. We'll be absolutely clear-eyed about the risk. There is a landing place here, but we will not accept anything less than what that is. Thank you.
America is a threat. Donald Trump is a threat. We must treat them that way. This is why we're responding this way with our tariffs. This is why we're inflicting maximum pain on the United States with our tariffs. He says this repeatedly. So that was April 10th all the way up to 2 days before the election. 2 days. Now, the question is when did he remove these tariffs? Well, let's start back at the first report that Mark Carney was going to have a cabinet meeting on this. This is from Reuters on April 11th, 2025. Carney says he will meet key Canada cabinet ministers to discuss tariffs. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on Thursday said he would convene a meeting of top cabinet colleagues on Friday to discuss the threat posed to the economy by U.S. tariffs. Carney, speaking to a televised press conference in Ontario, reiterated that Ottawa would respond with force until Washington lifted the tariffs. Oh, really? Well, I have one question, Mark Carney. Why was this published in the Canada Gazette on May 7th, 2025? And this is referring to an order in council that was issued on April 16th. This is like literally a couple of days after that cabinet meeting occurred. What does this say? United States Surtax Remission Order 2025, SOR 2025-122. Her Excellency, the Governor General in Council, on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance, makes the annexed United States Surtax Remission Order under Section 115 of the Customs Tariff. Conditions. Remission is granted on the following conditions. The goods imported into Canada before October 16, 2025. No other claim of relief of the surtax has been granted under the customs tariff in respect of the good, and the importer makes a claim for remission to the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness within 2 years of the date of importation. This order comes into force on the day on which it was registered. What does all of that mean? Well, what this means is the tariffs are technically still in place, just like we technically still have a carbon tax, even though it's at 0%. So these tariffs are technically still in place. The catch is, folks, is that any company can apply for an exemption, which effectively means that the tariffs are no longer in place. That's what that means. If every company is exempt to a tariff, then the tariff doesn't do anything. But what does this allow Mark Carney to do? It allows him to continue to say, well, we've imposed tariffs on the United States. What he didn't tell you is that they've exempted everybody from them. I can't even begin to say how irritated this makes me. Because this isn't lying to just conservative voters. This is lying to literally every single Canadian in the country and every single Canadian abroad. that was looking at these press conferences, listening to Mark Carney speak, and basing their vote on what he said. Remember all that tough talk I just showed you? Standing up to the Americans. We're one of the only countries retaliating. Well, Mark, how are we retaliating when you've literally put an exemption on everything? That's like you walking into a store and the store telling you, by the way, everything in this store costs $1,000. And then you say to them, okay, well, I'm leaving because I can't afford anything. And then the store owner says, oh, but wait. I'm giving you 100% discount on everything. Okay, wait, so everything costs $1,000, but you're giving me a 100% discount, meaning everything costs nothing? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, in that case, I'll take everything. That's what this order in council does. And they considered why, and they actually wrote it in this article in the Gazette. Take a look. The government of Canada recently imposed surtaxes on a wide range of products from the United States. During consultations held in the context of these surtaxes, Canadian stakeholders and partners confirmed that Canada's countermeasures were a necessary response to the United States tariffs. However, some stakeholders noted concerns with challenges in adjusting their supply chains to Canada's surtaxes, notably in the manufacturing, public health, healthcare, public safety, and national security sectors. So, what did Mark Carney decide to do? Well, he has all these people coming to him from all these different businesses saying, you're killing our businesses, Mr. Carney. So Carney says, well, maybe I'll just do the exact same thing, but in reverse that I did with the carbon tax. Everyone knows the carbon tax exists, but I will publicly sign an order in council telling everybody that I am reducing it to zero. So this was the opposite. He publicly told everybody that these tariffs were in place and that he was adding more tariffs to people. Remember that? He was adding more tariffs. And we covered the fact that he was saying that he was adding more tariffs to the U.S. auto sector, despite the fact that most of those were going to be exempt anyway under the USMCA. So he publicly declares that he has all these tariffs on America and he's standing up to Trump and talking tough. But on this occasion, he decided not to have a publicly filmed session of him signing this order in council. Why? Because it completely contradicts, and I mean contradicts, every single thing that he said about Donald Trump and that he said about the United States and their tariffs and what we were doing in response. There were no tariffs as of April 16th, 2025. That's what that means. Any company that wanted to apply could receive it. And now we fast forward to a couple of other scenarios. We fast forward talking to Donald Trump. Gee, I wonder why Donald Trump was so nice to him. It's because none of the American goods were having tariffs charged on them. Maybe that's why Donald Trump was being very nice to Mark Carney. Maybe. And maybe now we know why there is not going to be a federal budget disclosed this year. Because Mark Carney was saying throughout his campaign that there was going to be $20 billion in extra revenue that he was going to incorporate into his platform. But that wasn't actually reflected in his platform. Vashi Kapela's actually called him on it. Called Francois Philippe Champagne, you know, the finance minister of everything. And then we don't get any answers. Oh, there's just going to be a fall economic statement. Well, no wonder. Because in that budget is going to be a pretty big missing line item of $20 billion from tariff revenue. Why? Because there is no tariff revenue, because everything is exempt. Folks, we are only in to about a month and a half of Mark Carney as Prime Minister. And already, we've seen all of his ties to China. We don't know his assets yet. He completely negated every single tariff that was imposed on Donald Trump during this trade war that he kept telling us about. And we don't get a budget. He has told probably one of the biggest lies in recent Canadian history to all of Canada regarding these tariffs. And this is what you voted for, Liberals. We've been trying to warn you about Mark Carney. I go back to our interview with Desiree Fixler. I cannot stress that enough. If you have not watched that, go and watch it. Desiree Fixler used to be an investment banker. She spent almost 25 years in the industry. She worked in Mark Carney's circles. She had Mark Carney's mentality until she worked at Deutsche Bank and realized the big scam that was going on. And she said in that interview, Mark Carney creates crises. That's what he does in order to benefit himself. Well, we just got the living proof of that in the Canada Gazette, that Mark Carney on April 16th, 2025 signed an order in council effectively nullifying every single tariff that we had on the United States. And he went on for another 2 weeks to tell Canadians the risk of Donald Trump and how Pierre Poilievre was the one that wasn't going to stand up to him, and how Pierre Poilievre was going to be the one to capitulate. Meanwhile, Mark Carney walked back to everything as quietly as he could and effectively showed his true colors. He doesn't give a damn about the Canadian voters. He calls the people of Canada the owners of Canada. Well, Mark Carney, you've now been exposed, and you're going to have to explain this every single day for the next, who knows how long it's going to be until the next election. But every single day, you're going to have to explain to the Canadians, the 40 million Canadians that you lied to in this election, why you lied to them, and how they can trust you ever again.